took place in Columbia, South Carolina. Tennessee took on South Carolina today, fellas. This was the biggest, probably the most talked about, mysterious team that's sitting there lurking on the edges. We've already kind of pre-approved them as the bridesmaid. If Georgia wins the SEC, automatically Tennessee goes in. They might even jump over another conference champ or two. All that halted today. What did you see or take away from that game that we all kind of knew? We knew it was an impossibility for them to A, lose, and B, get taken apart like that. Matt Hayes, how did we miss on this? Or is this just college football?
George, they literally had two gimme putts, South Carolina and Vanderbilt, and they're in. Right. And they're in. They're the four most likely. High percentage of them being in the playoff, and they blew it. Not only they blew it, it was disgusting. I think South Carolina scored in their first 6 series. South Carolina, which by the way, a week earlier,
scoring
touchdowns.
They scored touchdowns. Felder.
Not just touchdowns, Spencer Rattler touchdown passes, which is another wild thing about this. They scored 6 points last week against a Florida defense that might be the worst defense in that team's history. 6 points on a fake punt. They lost like 38-6. They scored 63 today. Spencer Rattler, who had 8 touchdowns and 9 interceptions coming into the game, was 30 of 37 for 400 and something with 6 tuds and no picks, and was making every single throw in the game.
Against a team, Felder, to Matt's point, against a team that really – a lot of its fans are making college playoff reservations, flights. I mean, they got the trip packages going, and why wouldn't you? Like Matt said, South Carolina and who? Vandy. To end the season with?
Oh, they had that South Carolina and Vandy.
You got to handle that. And you don't have to go into the playoff. I mean, you don't have to go into the SEC semifinal. Michael Felder, your biggest takeaway in watching that game down there on that SEC East side?
I think Beamer did to Tennessee what Tennessee's been doing to a lot of people. Except he did it in reverse. We've seen Tennessee use a lot of speed and space. He used space to get inside. And you look at a lot of their big plays, those big plays came on those digs, those over routes, and then they ran those shallow cross. And that's where all their plays came from. That's where their big plays came from, because Tennessee was so worried about the outside that they couldn't protect the inside. So for me, it was an exercise in not complementary football, in counter football, where they countered where the other team was expecting them to attack. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is seeing a team do something like that, because and George, you know this. I study. I look. I'm looking. And when you see a team, South Carolina, they were ready for this football game. Not just prepared, they were over prepared, and they knew, hey, if we line up in this formation, if we do these things, they can't touch us. And that was one of the best parts of the football game for me, was Spencer Rattler being the thrower that we saw. And I meant to ask, I text this to Trevor too, because I know you were at when DK, when Dakarian Joyner was at the Elite 11.
Mm-hmm.
You worked with him, right?
Yep.
Tell me about him, man, because I thought he had a good game. This is a guy that's he was a quarterback, then a wide receiver, then moved back, and then back and forth, and then he showed up for these guys.
Yeah, he showed up big. It's hard to really describe, like, when you think a kid should just solely play quarterback, but you don't want to go up and be like, I think you should just go play this position. I always thought he should just play that position just because of how unique he is. But then you see what college staffs do. They turn and they want to get more out of him. And we've seen some of those other kind of Swiss Army knife type kids. But to me, he was a quarterback. And I think if you groom him and redshirt him a year, you'll get everything that you saw that he could bring to the table in other positions with the ball in his hand every play.
Right.
Huge win tonight for South Carolina, 606 total yards of offense. And to Matt Hayes' point, Spencer Rattler, 453 yards. Honestly, arguably easily biggest game of his career.
George, he was
biggest
hitting. He was making every throw accurately. It was wild, and he was doing it. He was doing it off schedule. He was doing it by moving in the pocket, things he hasn't done, his entire career. It was like it wasn't even the same guy out there.
He's possessed, a man possessed. You love to see that, and especially from a redemption story. You're leading your own program last year after waiting in the wings behind a couple Heisman Trophy winners, and you were a higher ranked prospect than any of them. You're 6-0. Although all barroom brawls and your own student section is calling for your replacement.
Yep.
And we're undefeated. So stepped up, he stepped to the side, owned it like a man, tough. 20 years old, I'm talented and we're winning and you're calling for somebody else. Found some new space. Granted, he had to go 1,500 miles east to do it. Decides to go into Jurassic Park. We talked about that preseason. I didn't think anybody was going to be under more pressure. Now, the pressure got reduced on South Carolina when these other programs popped up around them in the SEC East. But what a redemptive night tonight. South Carolina knocking out Tennessee, and it isn't even close.